Hello, this is Trent Chat, and we are very pleased to have. This is the first, and maybe I don't know, maybe the only interview, well, video interview with the makeup historian Sara Long. So we're going to talk about the play Hamilton. In we're going to talk about just not only just the play, but things surrounding it. But it's kind of focused on the play, which is on Disney Plus for the past couple of months, and I've watched it a number of times, and there was the whole reason why I even thought about doing this interview was in the play. There is a part close to the end where Eliza Hamilton is talking about it's a line saying, "Let future historians wonder." And so when I heard that line, the first thing I thought about, well, I know a historian, and I wonder what she's wondering about this, and just not that in particular, but just about this whole play, and what has been embellished and what is accurate. So that is what we're going to be talking about, just Hamilton in general. So Sara, how you doing? Well, everyone can see you right now. This is kind of awkward because I've never done a video interview, and normally I don't have the fancy stuff where I could take you out of frame and then bring you in and say, "Hey, here you are." But no, you're already here. Everyone else seeing you. So if what people don't know, she's a returning guest, and so I guess let people know and what you do and everything, and I guess we'll get into this discussion on Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show again. I'm really excited, and I feel very honored that this is a visual interview. Maybe I hope it's not the last one. I hope you get to do, lots more. But basically, long story short, my nickname, the makeup historian, it derives from my very random career change. I used to be a professional makeup artist and then decided to pursue history, and now I currently work as a history professor. So very very humbled that I get to pursue something I'm really passionate about for work. And yeah, and thankfully I still get to dabble in makeup a little bit too, so that's fun. And we were just talking a little bit about how my it's not official just yet, but my maybe manager was giving me a little bit of crap, saying like you can't show up on a visual interview as the makeup historian and not have your makeup done. Not that I wouldn't, but still, you and him kind of revved up the pressure a little bit. I was like, dang, I gotta, get dolled up.
Oh, I didn't mean to put any
No, no, no,
pressure
I'm
on
just
you.
giving you a hard time. Yeah, but I'm really excited, and I'm excited to talk about Hamilton too. It's been quite the controversial topic. So,
Yeah, I guess first off, I would just mention, and I guess to kind of get a political point out of the way, is is the fact that Hamilton is the focus of this play, and it's so popular, and on Broadway and everything, and after a while, well, I knew this before watching the play, but the fact of that they're wanting to do a play on Alexander Hamilton, I kind of understand that, especially liberals in particular probably love Hamilton in the fact that because he wanted to start a national bank and all of that, and it feel like like he was more a proponent of bigger government. Now I would propose that I'm pretty sure even the size of government now, he probably will be like, okay, this is too big. But
mhm.
but in that sense, he was still for a bigger government than everyone. I would say to everyone else at that time. And I feel like a lot of his ideals were things that people from the progressive side of view tend to want to glamorize for the country as opposed to all the other founder fathers. Now, I'm just saying that that's just a statement. You don't have to comment on that. I just want to get that political point out the way.
Yeah, that's okay.
So other so one thing I was wondering, so in watching the play, in all the things that were going on, and so I mean, there's not a lot of controversies about Hamilton in this play, even though there was one about the affair that he had um, with um, with Miss Reynolds. Can't remember her first name, but and that was in the play, and then I guess maybe the sense of that. I know there's one song in there is about him about why you feel like you're the smartest in the room. So I guess it's more of a sense of that he was very arrogant
Mm.
and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
so and that he wrote a lot. And but I mean that's not a controversy, but it's just that there was another song in it where it just talks about that he just writes nonstop. He just wrote so much, and then at the end, Eliza, tried to make sense. She said to try to make sense of all of his writings and all of that. Like I said, that's not so much a controversy, but I just want to ask you, what other controversies that weren't covered in the play?
Well, I think, especially in regards to right now, the biggest controversy that I'm noticing is what's going on within the field because of the different ways and the times that this play was
You mean in the
introduced through.
you mean in the history in the field of history?
Yeah,
Oh,
amongst historians, there's a lot of controversy. I mean, many of us adore the play, but most of us would agree, that it's not 100 because it's not 100% historically accurate. So although we may love it from a creative standpoint and we like that it prompts this whole new generation to explore the colonial era of American history, there's a we get into, quite a bit of debate about certain aspects of the play. And it's, to me, what really stands out is the play originally, I believe it came out on Broadway in 2016. So, you had to be able to afford to go see the play and somehow figure out how to get the ticket. So it was introduced to a very specific socioeconomic class within American society when it was on Broadway. Then, in 2018, many historians put together this book called Historians on Hamilton. So it's a huge collection of different essays that really examine it. But again, that's a very particular group of people. These are people who they specialize in this. And then in 2020, Hamilton was released on Disney Plus. So then we had a whole bunch of new different socioeconomic classes who were introduced to the play. So the responses throughout these three different kind of points or time frame here is very different. And to me, looking at that's very interesting as a historian, is how these controversies have continued to kind of build on top of each other because of the ways that it was introduced. And even myself, the way in that book, Historians on Hamilton, many of the historians who wrote about it saw it when it was on Broadway. I never saw it when it was on Broadway. So even just the type of response that I had is very different from the ones that they had. And
Mm.
that's something that I think it's important to note, not only for current historians or current students of history, but definitely for the future.
So
That
it kind
there's
of
a
seems like,
reason. Yeah.
oh, well, it kind of just in how you described it, it's something that I haven't really thought about it. Where so from in the beginning, in particular about this play, you had it to where first it was introduced and mostly just people, most wealthy people who only lived in New York, because it was just in Broadway. If I'm not mistaken, it was just in Broadway. It didn't tour, right? It hasn't toured anywhere. It just,
I
or it
don't
has it.
think so. I'm actually
So
not 100% sure about that. That's a great
it,
question.
well, either way, even if it toured, it still would have been a lot of money. So, so yeah, so at one point you had it to where it was more so just people who like musicals, and on top of that are wealthy. So that's a small segment of people, and so you have it introduced that way at first, and then you expand it just a tad bit more by having this book that is, I would guess, most historians like yourself are the ones that are seeking this book, because I never heard of the book. So
Yeah.
so from that, so it expanded a little bit, but not so much. I guess you could say it expanded in academia,
Hmm.
as far as that. And now with it being on Disney Plus in 2020, it has expanded. I would say probably to the largest degree, where it's being on Disney Plus, to where if people who have a Disney Plus subscription, which is a whole lot cheaper than one ticket to see Hamilton, so,
Yeah.
or college tuitions. So yeah, so now people are able to see it. A lot more people are able to see it on Disney Plus. So I would guess, well, maybe not since it's on Disney Plus, but I was thinking maybe it gets to the next point where it's on like ABC or something like that, and then everyone, a whole lot more people can see it. So
Yeah.
Then again, I doubt that because Disney Plus want that exclusivity of having it on it, having it on that app. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. As you were saying,
Oh, yeah. No, and I was just going to add as well that especially when it was introduced on Disney Plus, it was during the COVID-19, shutdown. So it
yeah,
was during a
it had a
very,
captive audience.
yeah, people were really, we were in quarantine. We didn't have, we were in a shutdown, and
Yep.
many of us, we had a lot of time to kill, and kind of we really could analyze this, and it was also that not only during because of the pandemic, but because of just how polarized the political stage was at that particular time. So it was a whole new response to it, especially as well too. I want to add that when it first came out, the first lady, she had a lot of positive things to say about the play too. So there was, in regards to its political context and the response politically, it was received very positively. It prompted a lot of diversity, new conversations, but then when it was reintroduced on a new platform in a very different context, it had a very negative response. So these are all things I think overall the main issue or thing to note, I wouldn't say it's an issue, but just something to really keep in mind whenever talking about the play is the importance of context. So, are we talking about how it was received in 2016, or how it was received in 2020 and what was going on in the world? And that's what historians do. So I do think you made a good point, though, about especially with the book, it's a very specific kind of approach to it. It's the historical, very objective. We rely on sources, we're going back, providing evidence. And then the response in 2020, it was a much more emotionally charged response to the play. And I understand. I will say, though, again, kind of how I mentioned that I didn't see it on Broadway, and personally, I'm not a huge fan of musicals. There's a few that I like, but if it's a historical one, I'm naturally going to be a little bit more critical of it.
Now actually that that's how kind of how I feel because I'm not a big fan of musicals, but I do like history. So
Yeah.
so that I look, I'm gonna be, so to be completely honest, it's probably the musical I have watched the most
Oh,
over and
okay.
over again, only because of that, the historical part of it and the political part of it in it too, because they talk about politics, which is kind of funny. There's one part in in the play where Thomas Jefferson literally says, "Can we get back to politics?" in, in the middle of the play. So, that just those two aspects really makes me interested in watching it, and also on the fact that we were going to do this interview, so it just keep
Yeah.
watching it over and over again too. But I don't watch a lot of musicals. I mean, as far as musicals go, and like if I was going to critique it as a musical, I'm like, oh, it's great. Well, you know what? This is something that totally I just thought about right now. As far as musicals go, there's one thing in particular that just kind of makes me laugh, but I understand why. Is the fact that Lin Manuel Miranda as Alexander Hamilton. I know
Oh,
it's his play. I know it's his play. I know he wrote it and everything. But of all the people in on the cast, it's just like he kind of stands out because he doesn't really sing well.
oh,
And
you don't think he sings well?
not really like he doesn't really sing well. In it to me, I mean, he just kind of is in a little bit of monotone. He kind of more so is talking than
Oh,
more so than singing. But then again, but I know he wrote it. It's his play, so why would he not be in it? So I just every time I watch it, it's like he's the only one that stands out. Like everyone else, like Leslie Odom Jr., Philippa Sue, all of them are great. It just but him in particular, he don't sound that great. It's now I'm pretty sure like he's done all these other movies and everything. So I mean, it's not really a criticism of his writing. It's more so a criticism of his actual singing. And I feel like I actually would want to watch it now because I know he's not doing it now. A matter of fact, I think most of them are not doing it now. So I just wonder how whoever's playing Alexander Hamilton now. Well, I don't even know. They don't know if they're even doing it now during COVID. But whoever was doing it when he walked away from it, I wonder how that person actually sound. Because like I would think all the songs would sound a bit different. From how he sound compared to someone else. Anyway, that was just some, I guess in trying to talk about the musical in particular. But yeah, I mean, yeah, you're right. Like,
Yeah.
watching musicals, I don't watch many musicals, but the fact of the historical element of it just draw me in and wanting to watch it.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not a singer, so I don't have any room to talk. I don't know,
I,
but I
I'm, not
definitely.
I'm not a singer now. I'm not a singer either, but it is obvious. It is pretty obvious. I mean, if you go back and just go back and watch it one time and just listen to him compared to everyone else, it's just like, I don't, I don't really get. He's not really singing in this. I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but I don't want to go down a rabbit hole on this. But I would compare it. I would compare it like this. Now, this, whether know who this is or whoever, he reminds me of Kurt Franklin. That, as far as someone who has written all the songs, he put all this together, and then when he tried to get out and actually sing, he doesn't sound as good as everyone else, as the rest of his choir and all that. I'm just putting it out there for, if you know, you know. So
I understand your point of view. Yeah.
that's what it reminded me of. Like this, yeah, he reminds me of Kurt Franklin. That's someone that I guess feel like, well, I wrote the whole thing, so I got to I got to be out in front of
Yeah.
it.
Well, I will
Anyway,
say from what I
not
know.
getting on a tangent.
Oh, I know you got on a tangent. Usually I'm the one who does that. I'm usually really bad about that. No worries. I completely understand. I can't judge you for going on a
Did you,
tangent.
I hope you didn't lose your point, your train of thought.
Oh,
Did you?
no. No, it's okay. For once, I actually remembered it. If you ask my students, I'm usually really bad about that, and they'll have to, kind of get me back on track. But I was just going to mention, from what I do know about the research that he conducted when he was writing the play, I think the reason I can play devil's advocate here, because there are many gaps in the historical narrative. Because the reality is, historians or all historical research, we have to depend on the primary sources. So I think where he was coming from the creative aspect, is when he was doing his research, because I do think he actually went to several archives to look into this and get a better sense of who Hamilton actually was. So my guess is, as a creative writer, he was probably looking at those gaps in the historical narrative as, this is a chance where I can interject my voice, or give a new spin, or introduce some more contemporary ideas. And I get that. And I mean, if I was in his shoes, I would, okay, I totally understand. I would see those kind of gaps as a chance to be more creative, but I'm not. That's not my thing. I am a historian, so I am a
Yeah.
little particular about it. But I can understand why he would have done it, and I do think that there are positives to that approach, and that there are positive things we can take away from the play. My only hesitation and concern is just how easy it is for people to assume that this is what actually happened, and it's a very fine line. So I will say that I do believe he actually did conduct quite a bit of research, and I have a lot of respect for him for that. And by no means, I mean, I wouldn't, this is not what, I don't write plays. I don't think I could have done what he did, and performed in it as well. But I will say, though, I wish he would have consulted more historians when he was writing it. I do think he went to different archives, but I don't know how many historians he actually talked to, because like a good example is the movie Lincoln by Spielberg. I know that they conducted a lot of research and actually hired real historians to help him create the sets, to make sure that the White House looked the way that it did when Lincoln was in there. So as a history professor, I appreciate that when you go and talk to actual historians to help you out. But it's a Broadway play, and it's an amazing one for what it is. But is it something that we can rely on for 100% historical accuracy? No. But
Well,
it does
the
get the
source.
conversation going. So,
Well, I think the I guess the main source of the play came from a book by Rob Shirt. I forgot his name, but like there was the Rob Sure now. I'm probably butchering the name, but like that's but it I guess the source of I guess for the screenplay for this play was from that particular book,
mm,
where it didn't seem like there was a lot outside of that, where he just took everything from the book to put the play together. Um, at least that's from the main source. At least that's where it seemed like that's where it came from. But I know one thing. Well, I know one thing you mentioned too is I guess in the sense of from a from I guess political point of view, in the sense um even even though you had, like I say, you mentioned about the first lady, but then it did have a little bit of a controversy when Vice President Mike Pence went to the play, and then everyone in the cast, I guess, felt felt the need to have to make a statement while he was there, as opposed to just doing the play as usual. but but
mhm,
and so you had that happen, and also in the play there. Well, it's throughout, but there are also other little political jabs in it. There's two in
yeah.
particular. There's a scene where the Skylar sisters are singing, and then in the middle of it, they start talking about the Declaration of Independence, and then one of them mentioned that, well, I would hope to meet Thomas Jefferson and have him to add women, to the sequel, as
Mm,
far as all men are created equal. And she was
yeah.
saying like, well, we should add women to it, as if that's what that meant. Because
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, so and then you have that, and then you also had another one where you had Hamilton and Lafayette, where in the middle they were, I guess, getting ready to go to war, and then like in the middle of that they were just saying about them both being immigrants, and they're like, well, immigrants get the job done, kind of like a wink and a nod to, like, like, immigration and all of that was going on. And so it was funny because this play, the one that is on Disney Plus, was filmed in June of 2016.
Mm,
So this was before Pence went.
okay.
If I'm not, if because I forget when Pence went, but I think it wasn't because that would have been like just a couple of months in office. So I don't think he hasn't been there at that time yet. So yeah, so there was all little political stuff in there like that, little jabs, and also other things as well that I maybe haven't even thought of, that I'm pretty sure in there. So now one
Yeah.
thing. Oh, go ahead.
No, I apologize. I cut you off. What were you going to
No, no,
say?
no. Go ahead. I was yeah. Finish your thought.
Yeah, I didn't know as much about the Mike Pence event. And I
Hmm.
don't think that that perhaps was the best move by the cast, but the reality is that they do have every right to express that.
Hmm.
That's one of the beautiful things about America, is that they can use their voice, and they are using their voice. But I don't know if I don't think that was the most professional move. So I'm a little sad to hear about that.
Well, I'm pretty sure
But
they were, they were applauded by everyone that they that they respect. Put it that way.
mm, okay, yeah, yeah, I don't think that was a good move personally. but
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, a good number of people will say that, but like I said, I'm guessing to the people they actually care to get applause from, that's who they got it from.
Mhm,
Everyone else that probably that had a problem with it, they is people that they don't really um respect or care for, just to say. So
yeah.
um now, well, speaking of people who didn't get a lot of respect, um, uh, in the in this play, well, on the second half of the play especially, John Adams gets
Ah.
he gets portrayed in a way where um I feel like. either either the whole play just took the attitude of Hamilton and how he felt about John Adams, or everyone just really just oh people just really didn't like John Adams. So I just want to ask you, was John Adams as bad as they portrayed him in the play, or and also it I guess the um did John Adams and Alexander Hamilton really didn't like each other like it was portrayed?
Well, I mean, long story short, many of the founding fathers they debated each other a lot. So there definitely was tension between them. But I mean, was John Adams really as bad as the play made him out to be? I would say no. He contributed a lot to our foundation and continued throughout the remainder of his life, way past the revolution. So was there tension between them? Yes, there was, because they had very different perspectives on the balance of power within our government. And they were both there. They lived through it when we were putting together our founding documents. Um, they both just had a very particular personality. They weren't exactly everyone's cup of tea. We could put it that way. They were very passionate, headstrong, but both very intelligent. So, and that actually is, I think that's something that maybe should have been highlighted in a more positive light, was that the fact that there was so many intense debates going on, that was a good thing. That helped the foundation of our country. So it's important to remember that this is a very modern perspective on what people today would like Hamilton to have been. But the reality is that the play really didn't portray the true Hamilton. That's what it comes down to. And I think that's also what's at the roots of so many conversations amongst historians. Like they portray him out to be someone who is very progressive and forward thinking. And he was very forward thinking, definitely ahead of his time, but he wasn't really as in touch with and had some very controversial views on immigration, which is surprising. He wasn't very publicly anti-slavery, as the play made him out to be. He
Mm.
had very particular opinions about gender. And I think also, too, going back to John Adams, this also brings up the issue of more nationalism ideas and patriotism, kind of that fine line of, because basically the revolutionary era in American history, we've romanticized that a lot. And that's also what the play does too. It romanticizes this moment in American history, but the reality is that it was messy. It was a very, kind of brutal
Yeah.
time throughout our
I mean,
history.
there was a war in there, so
Yeah, it was a very savage, kind of, it was a fight. And that's the thing too that I wish they would have highlighted more, is that it was messy, it was not perfect, but our founding fathers and mothers were willing to die for this, and that's a testimony in itself too. They were willing to die for what they were creating, and I think maybe they highlighted that a little bit much, a good job. But that also is kind of at the root of why there was such a tense relationship between not only Hamilton and Adams, but other founding fathers, because you got to be able to put yourself in that mindset. If I'm willing to die for something, I'm going to advocate for this with everything I have, every fiber of my being, and be very passionate about it. So yeah, it was tense. But was John Adams a bad person? I guess that comes down to perspective. I would say no. Hamilton was not a bad person, but the play didn't really portray either of them in regards to what we really know based off of the evidence that we have. So there's always a degree of speculation, but that's also
what
where we have to be very careful to not get carried away with that and to not
so
interject our.
oh
Sorry.
well I just want to ask, um did you see the HBO series on John Adams?
I did. Yes, I do
Is it
like
is
that
it
one.
is that one more is that closer to being accurate is in that series as opposed to how he's portrayed? You don't see him at all in Hamilton. But he's mentioned here and there, and just is not in a very favorable light in a lot of cases.
I would say that the HBO series about John Adams was definitely more accurate, and I think the reason is because the collection of material that we have from John Adams is one of the most extensive. So he's definitely one of the founding fathers we know the most about, just because of how many letters we have collected from him. And the documents that we have from Hamilton, more of them are in a public setting, not so much in a private. So we have more private documents from Adams, and I think that's why we have a little bit better sense of his personality. So what we're kind of feeding off of in regards to Hamilton was a lot of the things that he published. We have a lot of public perceptions of him and kind of the public response, not as many as John Adams in regards to those private documents. So I think that also prompts a lot of people to lead with emotion, not logic, when they're examining Hamilton.
Mm. Yeah. So, yeah, kind of like what I mentioned in the beginning is that, um, just kind of this, romanticizing of Hamilton in particular, and like it's not surprising in particular for this play, but also in the fact that, as far as for the things that he stood for. So like when I mentioned, even though I would probably say he was for, of all the founding fathers, he was for more government than the rest of them. That being said, even I would probably be right in saying if he saw where the size of government is now, he would he wouldn't be as to see where it led to. Probably would maybe think about, have a second thought about, giving this much control to the government at this point. But the, another person, obviously, that is very instrumental to this play is Aaron Burr, because obviously he's the one who shot him. So, now, in the play, throughout, from the beginning to the end, Aaron Burr is portrayed, not so much a villain really throughout the play. He's portrayed as someone that is just building resentment to the point to where he wants to kill him. And so where things are happening throughout the play, just at every point, it seems like Hamilton is in his way. Mm-hmm. And he has a song in there where he talk about want to be in the room where it happens, and wait for it, and it also makes him look like one that he has. I mean, even from Hamilton in the play, that he has he really has no principles and more of an opportunist, and just someone that just looking to try to say as little as possible just to get ahead, not really taking any risk. Now, all of that, how he's portrayed, is that anywhere true? True about Aaron Burr?
I would definitely say out of everyone in the play, that relationship was probably the most well portrayed. I would definitely say that is much more close to the actual relationship and just how it progressed and got much more tense. And the thing that they didn't really highlight in the play too much, though, was in regards to the duel, just kind of the culture of dueling at that time. And it was so much more.
Wait, before you get into dueling, I want to put this in here right quick, because just so I could mention this, because in the play they go down, I guess, like a list of everything that happens in a duel. It's called like the 10 Duel Commandments, which is a play on Notorious B.I.G.'s 10 Crack Commandments on one of his albums. So every time I heard it, because it was like the 10 Duel Commandments, like that is a play on Biggie's 10 Crack Commandments, and they're using it for this in this play. And also, and so they use that.
Know that. So
yeah. I'm not telling you. I'm not recommending anybody to go listen to it, but I'm just saying that is kind of where it came from. I'm pretty sure that's where it came from, because it's sung kind of like how the song, like 1, 2, 3, 4. That's how it's sung on Biggie's song as well. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that in case I never got a chance to mention it, since you mentioned about dueling, and also have another thing about dueling. But go ahead.
Yeah, no, that was really interesting. I did not know that, so I learned something. That was really nice. But what I was going to say is there have been so many papers and articles, lots of research conducted on the culture of dueling. So I don't think that they really portrayed the how much of it was about prestige and about protecting your honor. It really was more so about honor within our culture, more so than it was about personal grievances. It was about the fact that you were willing to die for something, and what were you willing to die for. So I wish they would have focused a little bit more on that. But again, that's just me being a nitpicky historian. So
Now, when people talk about like the political climate right now, everything's just so toxic, everything's so horrible. And every time someone mentioned that, I always go back, so before this whole play, I've always known about, Aaron Burr shooting Alexander Hamilton. And so every time when I would hear about that, ever since I've been involved, I was like, you do remember, Aaron Burr shot Alexander Hamilton in a duel. And also not only just that, but duels in general were pretty common. Especially compared to now, we don't have duels. So, I mean,
yeah.
so people had duels not say all the time, but just like in that song, even when you talk about the duels, like they mentioned in that 10 dual commandments, that most of them didn't get to the point where they had a duel. It was resolved before they got to the point where they were, drawing 10 paces and turning around. But yeah, so whenever we talk about political climate, just think about it. We're not dueling, so we can at least and the rest of that we're not doing that. Well, not doing that yet. We ain't bringing it back yet, but we're not doing it right now.
Yeah, and I will say for anyone who's interested to learn more about that, actually, there's a phenomenal historian, Dr. Freeman at Harvard University. Um, Her classes are amazing, but you can also look up a lot of her work, and she has published quite a bit about Hamilton as well. She even contributes an essay to the book that I was referencing earlier, Historians on Hamilton. So, but she has done many and also lots of podcast interviews too, just about the culture of dueling during that time. So she's an excellent resource for anyone who, if there's history students or other people who are just curious about it, she's a good one to look into her research. So
Well, all right, so we're back, and so we finished talking about duels now. So there's one other part, and so I know one there's a song that I mentioned before with Aaron Burr. We talk about in the room where it happens, and in that particular song, it's talking about where Hamilton, Madison, and Jefferson are basically it's the Compromise of 1790. If I'm not, yeah, 1790. So where Hamilton get control of the banks and all of that, and then the capital is moved to Washington D.C. So in the song, it says no one else was in the room where it happens, and in the song they're just talking about um, uh, Thomas Jefferson's claims, not so much. They're not. So the rest of the play, they're not saying so and so claims. They're just kind of going with it like this is like it's fact. But when they talk about this part, this particular thing, they make sure to say, well, Thomas claims this is what happened. So anyway, from that long, long intro about it, um, were there anyone else in the room? And I mean, is there much information about the Compromise of 1790?
That I'm glad you brought that up actually, because that is definitely one of the most like biggest sources of tension amongst historians is that particular moment. And that in the book Historians on Hamilton, there's a whole essay devoted just to that one song, because it completely takes away the fact that slaves would have been in the room. So it takes away their agency within this moment in American history. So that there's a lot of discussion about it. So we there to say that no one else was in the room, it's very catchy and it's good from that creative perspective, but it's not accurate. There were other people in there.
Yeah, it just dismisses the other humans, even though they were
Exactly.
slaves, but they were other people that was there, so it's kind of dismissed that they were in the room. But in saying that, who did anyone I guess publish anything about what happened?
There are quite a few, sources that come out, and I believe it's the I don't remember the exact title, but it's the fourth essay, I think it's the fourth or fifth essay within that book. Actually, don't quote me on that, but I do know it's in there. And they do give you quite a bit of sources that allude to why that wasn't, to give you some evidence as to why that's not true. There were sources that came out, but that definitely is one of the biggest sources of controversy amongst historians is we don't like that part, to put it simply. we're,
So
we're not a fan.
there's a consensus amongst historians that that is not true. That
Yes.
there were people in the room, and there are accounts about what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess I mean is that I'm guessing that's kind of rare, right? To get that
Oh,
for
to
everyone
get
to agree on that.
that's funny. That actually is kind of a rarity amongst historians because we like, I guess, it pretty much is arguing. We like to say it's
Mhm.
debating, and we do always have to supply evidence to back up our claims, but we do like to get into quite a few arguments. I mean, that's why lawyers usually have a bachelor's or a master's in history.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, but we do agree on that. And actually, I mean, I would say that for the most part, many historians actually like the play. We don't think it's accurate because we know it's not accurate, but we like that it is introducing the youth of our country to the colonial era. And many teachers, myself included, like to use the play now, especially that it's more accessible, as a teaching tool, to help kind of get these discussions going. And I've done assignments where I've had my own students try to figure out, what is accurate and what was not. And so then that allows us to also explore how to find things in government archives, professional archives. Where do we go? Where are those primary sources? So it can be used in a very positive sense for teaching, but it is not accurate, not 100% accurate.
well,
So,
so I know in in the sense of that particular song, and also in saying about the play in particular. I guess it would be my last question actually. Unless I think of something off the top of my head in the next couple of minutes. But as a historian, just watching a play or a movie or anything like that, I'm pretty sure it's kind of like nerve wracking in the sense. 'Cause, I mean, we've been talking about Hamilton, but just watching any sort of historical, movie, and I'm guessing from your point of view, it's probably like, no, no, that didn't happen. No, it didn't go that way. Right? I mean, it's kind of, I guess it'd be kind of like someone that is like a gun enthusiast who, like, know everything about guns. And then when they watch a movie or watch Jason Bourne or something like that, they're like, no, he didn't. No, there's too many bullets. There's not enough. No, or something like that. So, yeah, I'm guessing that's kind of the same for you in watching any of these, like, movies or plays.
yeah, no, it definitely is. I usually respond that way, in a very kind of nervous and critical way to anything that is, a historical film or drama, things like that. But you actually, when I first watched it, I believe that you saw my Instagram story when I was first
Hmm.
reacting to it, and I wasn't happy. I
Yeah.
wasn't. I was like, this is not accurate. So, but I had to give myself some time, to watch it all the way through, kind of think about it. And then I was like, you know what, this actually can be really positive if we talk, because it is, prompting those discussions. And I'm always a big fan of that. But usually my initial reaction is one of, I'm pretty anxious when I see these things go out.
I'm disappointed every time. Like, you
Yeah.
know what? So, I mean, I don't know how many of these movies you watch. So, what is the most accurate? I know this is like just coming out of nowhere. What is the most accurate movie or TV series that you've seen?
My personal favorite, I think the most accurate would be the Lincoln movie that I
Okay.
mentioned earlier. I'm a big fan of that one, especially because of how it clarifies the difference between the Emancipation Proclamation and the 13th Amendment. Many people think those are the same thing, and they're not. So, for that alone, I love the film, but I also love that they reached out to people who specialize in Civil War history.
Okay.
So I think collectively they did one of the best jobs that I've ever seen in a film, a historical film. So that would probably be my top pick, and
Okay.
I think that's high praise. I'm usually pretty critical of
Yeah.
these things.
I really enjoy Lincoln. I mean, also, Daniel Day Lewis is, is a great actor and
Very true.
playing Lincoln. Yeah, it was pretty good. I really did like it. Matter of
Yeah.
fact, it's I haven't seen it in a while. Probably want to go back and watch that. And on top of that, also the John Adams one, because I remember watching it when it first came out on HBO, and I really enjoyed that too. So,
I will say about the John Adams one of my favorite parts about that whole series was um, how they portrayed Abigail Adams.
mm,
I think they did a very good job bringing her story to life too, because she gets overlooked quite a bit. And I mean, I loved that they talked about one of her most famous letters where she tells John Adams to remember the ladies, especially for women's history. That I think that's a big thing. And although even then it wasn't 100% accurate, it still gets people talking about that and brings awareness to it. So I will say I think that series did a very good job in how they talked about Abigail. Yeah.
yeah, I agree. I forget who. I think it was Rosamund Pike who played, and I like her as an actress. If I'm not mistaken, that's who played. Oh, maybe it was Laura Linney. I forget. Um, but um, but yeah, I really like Abigail in the series as well. And also, so in Hamilton, one of my favorite characters is Eliza.
Mm,
And it just kind of what I was mentioning in the beginning, as far as the whole, when she mentioned about let future historians wonder how she felt. And it just, you know when when she talked about those letters that Hamilton wrote to her, and then she said she was going to burn them and all of that. And so I know, I mean, as far as what happened to those letters, who knows, but
mhm.
and what was in those letters. But then she came back later on after the indiscretion what happened with Miss Reynolds and all of that. And so, and you know if she, well, from in the play she says she lives another 50 years. And so she does all these things, as far as the orphanage. And then as far as, like, I guess, I don't know, I guess she was translating a lot of his writings, or just trying to put him in book form. I don't know. I didn't understand exactly what she meant by, as far as all her, the letters. I guess everything that he wrote, she tried to publish. I guess I don't know. Matter of fact, what did she do?
Yeah, she was very fundamental in helping to preserve and kind of set up Hamilton's legacy. She really did
Mm,
a good job in making sure that a lot of his works were published, and that they got the recognition, that they were preserved properly. So she was very fundamental in that.
okay.
She was not only just in Hamilton's image and legacy, but the families as well. She did a phenomenal job with that.
Okay.
Hmm.
Yeah. And I guess, was there anything more to Angelica Schuyler and Hamilton as opposed to what was in the play?
Yeah, I actually am curious to know more about this as well, because when I watched it, I was like, huh. I had heard about it a little bit, but that was something that I wanted to look into a little bit more. And I will say though that Dr. Freeman also did a really good interview on that. She talks more about it. This is the colonial era is her specialty for sure. There are other historians who specialize more so just in colonial history, but that's something I didn't know as much about in my foundational training. So I'm actually curious to look into that a little bit more as well.
Okay. Well, that's all the questions I have. But well, about Hamilton. But I
Okay.
would be remiss to not give you the opportunity to talk about the makeup in that on the
Oh.
show. I mean, come on,
Oh.
you're the makeup historian, so I have to give you the opportunity, if you want to talk about the makeup that was in the play. I don't
Okay.
have much else to say other than give you the floor.
Ah. Well, yeah, no, I think it's that's. Thank you for that opportunity. I love whenever I get to talk about cosmetic history. The makeup that is within the play is not 100% historical accurate, but that's for very understandable reasons because it was on Broadway. So
Mhm.
there's stage makeup. So in that sense, I'm sure if you saw them up close, it would be very heavy. And that the whole point of that is so that way everyone in the stage can see, the facial features.
Mm.
And on film, though, I think it actually read pretty well for what makeup would have been like at that moment, which for the ladies was a very, very more plain and demure for that kind of socioeconomic status to not basically really bold colors on the lips or accentuating certain features. That wasn't really popular during that time. Also, makeup was very different during them, from what it is today. We have a lot of synthetic materials in our makeup now, but during the colonial era, makeup was made out of strictly organic material. So that was another reason why it was really kind of more plain in comparison to today's standards because the makeup
Inexpensive.
wasn't going to last very long. Yeah. And if you did have um, a particular, a very prominent or like kind of rouge on the lips or on the cheeks, that was a status of you're doing pretty well within society if you can afford that.
Mm.
um, they're actually, and it's also important to keep in mind too that makeup within the colonies was very different in comparison to somewhere like France, where it was much more so being influenced by people like Marie Antoinette. More kind of
Boy,
the very
so are we talking
intense.
like Are we talking like powder wigs? Or are you talking about like I mean, as far as like the some of the pictures where like their faces like literally white, as far
Yeah,
as stuff like that?
there was quite a bit of influence from different cosmetic trends going on throughout France, but Americans were really trying to establish their own identity as well. So a lot of that came through in fashion and makeup and beauty standards. So there's elements of what was going on throughout different European nations, but it is kind of fascinating. You can see how Americans are trying to figure out their own identity, just even with the way that they dress. And for the gentlemen too, there were gentlemen who wore cosmetics, but I think with the gentlemen, we can see it a little bit more with their fashion, and that's also a good, certain trends that were popular throughout European nations were kind of worn by colonists who were much more on, kind of the loyalist side, who still wanted that European heritage. And then there were more radical patriots who wanted to establish a completely new identity. And that came through in fashion as well. So
Okay.
yeah, I like that question. I've never been asked that question.
what, what about the makeup?
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, that's
well,
kind of my thing. So
yeah, that's the reason why I wanted to ask you because I mean, I have to ask you about it. I mean, and like you said, I mean, in the play, obviously, it's not going to be how it was back then because, I mean, the priority is make sure everyone is,
Yeah, you can see
at
it.
the play can see it. Yeah. So it's not going to be like so. If they made a movie about it, it probably would be more accurate. So
Definitely.
yeah.
Yeah, I think it would, and even then too, that goes back to the Lincoln film. That
Uh huh.
a totally different era. We're talking Civil War here, not Revolutionary era, but still, that was a movie. Not a
Yeah.
Broadway play, and they did a very good job portraying what the cosmetic trends of that time would have really been, which was not a lot because we were going through a civil war, and the priority was keeping the Union together, not
Yeah.
cosmetics.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So so if people want to know more about what you're doing, as a matter of fact, so what you have coming up, and if people want to get in contact with you on social media, where would they go?
Yeah. Well, on social media, my username is at the Makeup Historian. And pretty much from Instagram, you can find everything else. You kind of start there, and I am in the process of redoing my website, so I'm excited for that to be done in a few months, and that way people can reach out if they have particular questions, like research questions. I try to be very a lot more accessible to the public. That's one of my main criticisms of my field is I feel like historians are not always easy to contact for with these types of questions. So if someone's looking to reach out on social media, I would start with Instagram. But I also have my own podcast as well, which is also called The Makeup Historian. And we did take a little bit of a temporary pause because of things going on with COVID, and I had to focus on my students, on teaching. No, that's my priority. So although I
Mhm.
love my podcast, I kind of had to put it on the side for a moment. But I am again within a few months we have some new interviews coming out, and I'm really excited to share them. So and they're kind of all
Okay,
across the board. Yeah, lots of
nice.
different topics.
And I think the last time we had you on, you talked about a museum. How's that going?
Yeah, I did. I founded the Museum of Cosmetic History about a little over a year ago, and COVID kind of messed that up
Mhm.
too.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's still, we're still continuing on, but we just had to kind of press pause on that as well because of, health concerns, and couldn't really go to the next step which is where we need to hire people. We couldn't, because of all the restrictions, can't really continue on too much in that, but we are still going to continue. So that's important. So right now we're really working on the website and establishing a digital database so that, and kind of, building the collection as well. So it is still going on. That's if people want to know more about that, we do have a separate Instagram account for them and a separate website. It's at Cosmetic History, and the website link is right there on our Instagram profile. So we will be posting quite a bit more, and I do have a few episodes coming up on the Makeup Historian that give people some kind of background as to where we're at in the progression of the project.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you know what? I guess another question since you mentioned about COVID and the pandemic in general. Just
Yeah.
I mean, how's it been the past year just teaching on the in these conditions?
It was really tough, actually. And the first interview that I did for your podcast was right in the beginning when we had to
Mm.
transition over. And although I really liked that interview, personally, I can hear in my voice just how overwhelmed I was at that moment in time. I hope no one else catches on to that, but they might now. But generally speaking, in the beginning it was really tough, and it still is to a degree, but I think I'm finally getting to the point where I'm truly kind of adapting and leveling up because I have to for the sake of my students, and I take that very seriously that they get the class that they paid for. But I think that means a lot. So it is a challenge, but I think I've actually learned a lot of new skills that will help me throughout my career, and it's kind of interesting and to watch the changes and try to figure out the direction of our educational system. So it is a challenge, but I'm still here. We're still going. So
Yeah, yeah. A lot of people have to were forced to learn about things like so we're using Skype or Zoom, GoToMeeting, all these platforms to do virtual classrooms or virtual meetings and all that. Like they will, even though this stuff has been available for years, but most people have been kind of just not wanting to use it until they were forced to. And now they actually have learned how to use this. I'm pretty sure it will definitely help. Even if we go back to normal, now that you know how to use a lot of these things, you could probably be a lot more productive in a couple of areas just because you know how to work Zoom now, as opposed to just like I got to get this person in person meeting. No, I don't have to. Let's do a Zoom meeting right quick. I mean, because you know what to do, and we can do that. So yeah, I mean that's kind of a silver lining when it comes to COVID. I will say that it kind of forced people to kind of really to broaden their horizons on a lot of these things. And when it comes to just like Uber Eats and DoorDash and all of that, just a lot of things where people were just reluctant to use any of these platforms, which probably would make things easier, but they just didn't want to do it out of habit. Now they was forced to do it for pretty much for the past year, and then now they realize it wasn't, yeah, I should have been using this before. A lot of things, not just this, but a whole lot of things. So
Yeah,
yeah, I think that's a little silver lining out of it.
definitely. I think, evolution and kind of progressing as a society is always difficult, but there's definitely positives that we can take away from this. And especially for historians, it forced us to move into the 21st century. We were a little hesitant, kind of dragging our heels a little
Hmm.
bit, but we're there now. Things are all digitized, and it really did help, our field get better at digitization and making our field more accessible, helping people learn about history, the marketable skills from it. We're able to do a lot more webinars, reach more people because of the technology. So, yeah, there's lots of
Yeah,
positives that we can actually take away from this.
yeah.
Yeah,
So Sarah, thank you so much for coming on for the second time.
of
And
course. Thank you.
I appreciate you being on here for this video interview. And like I said, well, we'll see what the future holds for the podcast. And if we are going forward later on, we would definitely want to have you back on for future episodes if we have those.
Yeah, of course. I would love to. Thank you so much for having me on the